hot night, could be pizza night, but I decided to kind of put that pizza onto a puff pastry and show you a really cool trick. And it is pretty quick. And we're talking about prep. Maggie's hot, you can see that. There's lots of kind of stuff in here. This is one of those things you can do vegetarian, you can do a lot of kind of meats and stuff. And so we've got a kind of a combination. I want to show you a few things first. We've got the pastry itself. So when you are defrosting it, that's the easiest time is when it's straight out of the freezer, just to be able to split it apart with a sharp knife. Now, I'm going to make a few of these, but what I want to do is show you how I'm going to do that. Now, the first thing, you could do just a single layer, but I've decided to go a double layer. And to help it with that kind of sticking and that crunch, we're going to baste it with a little bit of egg, okay? So just with a couple of eggs there in a little thing, just mix those up. And this just helps. Now I'll put that pastry on some baking paper. If you don't have baking paper, just make sure you spray the tray itself, otherwise it will stick. So just lightly doing, this is a little bit like when we make the spanakopita. So just lightly putting a little bit of that egg on, because we're going to do 2 layers of these. And what this also helps with, when you put the egg on top of the pastry itself, the puff pastry, it kind of creates this barrier that stops the moisture getting in. So you still get that fairly crunchy texture that you want. So just, again, one on each. Obviously taking off that blue plastic that separates it all. Just lining up as much as you can. And as I said, what you now want to do is give it one more little baste, which becomes that little barrier if you've got some of that moisture. And that moisture could even be things like little tomatoes, okay? Or Maggie's saliva. She's pretty close there. We'll make sure, keep our eye on her. So really just giving that a quick baste, keeping much of it on there as possible. You don't have to. And if you don't have any eggs, you can actually do it with just a little bit of oil or even butter. Kind of gives it the same effect as well. Okay, so we've basted that as much as possible without overdoing it. Now, a ricotta cheese here, here's a little cool trick. Rather than making a bland ricotta, let's kind of add a little bit of, oh, that looks like I cut myself there. Give that a shake. A little bit of tomato paste. I've made an absolute mess of myself there. And what you want to do is just kind of mix that in without creating as much mess as I did. Just mix that in. So with the fork, and waiting until it kind of changes colour, and then you know you've got enough of that little sauce in there. Again, if you don't have a tomato paste, you could put a little tomato sauce in that. Kind of becomes looks almost like a little bit of a cocktail sauce. Now with that becomes the base. I'm going to put a little bit more in. That becomes the base of your kind of puff pastry, tart, flan, whatever you want to call it, Friday night pizza in the heat. Okay, now again, I guess the key to this is don't put too much of everything on, because it will struggle to cook through and you will get a lot of that moisture. So just be mindful of the egg there. It's going to make it a little bit hard to spread. I know this doesn't look amazing at the moment. And in fact, I might even do the one at a time. Make the one at a time, and I'll come back and do the other one shortly. So with that one there, now I'm going to load this up with, this is going to be a kind of a meat lover's delight. I'm not going to use all this, but this is pre-cooked bacon I just did before. Doing it fairly thin slice, watch your fingers on there. And I've also pre-cooked, you can see there, I've also pre-cooked a bit of chorizo, or however it's said, just here. And now that's really oily, that chorizo. I actually didn't put any more oil in the pan. That was just as is. And you can see how much oil that's really loaded up. So I put that on a bit of toweling just to soak up a little bit of that oil. Now, what you'll notice is I'm kind of leaving the edges a little bit. I'll show you why when we get to that next steps. Now, it's just a case of kind of loading in what you want. I've put a mozzarella there with a little bit of Parmesan twisted in that as well. So you've got a number of kind of cheeses. Want to kind of put in a little bit of red onion. I've cut these really fine as well. You want to, unless you want it fairly uncooked, but the finer you cut them, the finer you'll find that, the softer you'll find that it'll actually cook, rather than getting that too heavy on the flavour. Now, some capsicum, again, just adding kind of what you want to add on there, a little bit like a pizza. I feel like I am in a pizza place at the moment. And I'm a big fan of sun-dried tomatoes, so you may not be. Again, it's all to taste, this stuff. And just kind of adding on there what you want to add on. Now, I ran out of basil. I thought I had basil. The basil thief has been and gone and taken the basil. So that's okay. You can see a little bit of basil there in that sun-dried tomato. Now, I've also got the oven on around 250. We will turn that down shortly to kind of cook it. So about sort of 10 or so minutes, might even be less, at a little bit of a lower temperature, so around 200. Now, I've got some crumbled feta there that I just crumbled up. Had a little block of feta, crumble that up. Again, you don't have to crumble it up. And I'm just going to put on some of that chorizo as well, just to really, and this is a spicy chorizo, so it's got some nice heat to it. Okay, so that's kind of, I think there's enough on there to sink a ship. Of course, nothing would be a pizza without a little bit of hot jalapeno. So a couple of those just to really kick it off. Amazing. Okay, so here's what I want to show you, is with that little kind of edge that I've got there, is just bringing it over. So you're kind of folding it like a little bit of an edge to stop stuff coming off. And it gives that little crunchy bit on the edge as well. Just folding it up. Just running it, pinch on the edge there to kind of keep it all together. So it almost looks like a large, or a plate as such. Now, this is something you can just quickly whip in the oven. About 10 minutes. I said I'm going to turn the oven down to around 200. Folding that around the edge. Now, if you really feel like being creative, what you could do is just a little bit more of that egg just on the edge there. It'll just kind of help it give it that crunch as well that you're looking for. Okay, so you don't have to, just an idea. Again, I mentioned before, if you've just got butter or a bit of oil, you can do it that way. So I'm going to whack that in the oven for around 10 or so minutes. You can keep checking it just to make sure you get that sort of brownness in there, and we'll come back and show you what it looks like.